Hello, friends. Chag Chanukah Sameach. Happy Chanukah. Normally, my vlogs are pretty short, but as we approach the sixth night of Chanukah, I want to share something that takes a little bit more time. I hope you'll be patient. I'd like to share with you the adult story of Chanukah. This story begins with the question, Mahi Chanukah? What is Chanukah? In the Talmud, that's the introduction to this holiday. The rabbis ask, what is Chanukah? It's a curious and profound question to be asking several hundred years after the historical events that led to the creation of the holiday. In some ways, Chanukah may be the most complex of all of our sacred days. Chanukah means dedication. And in fact, it is about rededication, renewal. It is at its core about earth and fire, about what is at the center of every spiritual path, paradox. Chanukah is about one of the most powerful three-letter words in our vocabulary. And. Not black or white, not good or bad, not earth or spirit, rather, and. Power and spirit. Things worth fighting for can morph into a repetition of violence and corruption. Paradox is hard to hold, hard to teach, but it is the essential lesson of Chanukah. A lesson that is particularly important at this moment when human beings everywhere are displaying a lack of ability to hold nuance, to appreciate the power of paradox, of this and that. The prophet Zechariah, taught us, Lo v'chayil, lo v'choach, v'lo v'choach, ki im bruchi amar yud-he vav-he, which means, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said Yud-he vav-he, the most mysterious name for God. The Torah of the earth has great power, and this power can be corrupted. Even those who claim a connection to God can be corrupted. Nothing is incorruptible, and nothing is unredeemable. And spirit and light are the key to our soul resilience. So, since Chanukah is one of our few holidays that is deeply rooted in actual historical events, let's take a moment to remember the history that is so often distorted for the sake of simplicity or dumbed down in order to teach children, neither of which I approve of. The events of Chanukah cannot be understood without starting with the ascent of Alexander the Great in the 4th century before the Common Era, BCE. Alexander was a philosopher king committed to the spread of Greek culture. He shared the gifts of this beautiful culture without demanding that people of other cultures forfeit their values or traditions. And the struggle to integrate new values without negating existing ones is a very challenging endeavor. Alexander the Great brought many revolutions in thought and practice to the Western world. Up until his time, economy and trade were mostly based on barter. You have something I need, I have something you need, we establish value and we trade. Alexander was interested in a more efficient system that could transcend borders and idiosyncratic notions of value. So he invested in the creation of coins, money, which was an economic revolution that made for a much more efficient international trade than barter. And there was a cost for giving up the barter system. But that's a discussion for another day. Money enabled an explosion of trade, and there was great growth in crafts, the development of all sorts of crafts. Crafts became a big business, and one no longer had to grow what one ate to survive. As a result, there's a significant shift away from farming economies. It results in a change in the way many people relate to the earth. There is a great population influx into city-states. Agrarian culture depended on the sun. One rose with the sun to work the fields, and when it became dark, people gathered around the hearth, shared stories, stayed warm, and went to sleep, since they had to get up quite early. However, when people gathered in cities, oil becomes a more valuable resource. You could buy oil in the marketplace, and now people could use oil lamps and have light after dark. They also had more wealth and leisure time. There was a growth in the moneyed class, and there was time for some of the other Greek cultural innovations, the baths, the theater, athletics. Leisure time creates an appetite for more pleasure. And of course, there was the attraction of the Greek gods and goddesses. So Alexander the Great dies in 323 BCE with no clear single successor, and his kingdom is split up among his generals and their families. The Middle East is split up between two families. The Seleucid family ruled Greater Syria, and the Ptolemy family ruled Egypt. They are both Hellenized. As I said, Greek culture is the dominant culture in Western civilization at the time. Everyone was impacted by Greek culture. Judea, ancient Israel, is in the middle between these two great kingdoms, Syria to the north, Egypt to the southwest. Now, this is kind of akin to Poland today and in modern European history, situated between Russia to the east and Germany to the west. The history of Poland vacillates between being under German control and Russian control. And so too with our people's fate. For some time, the Ptolemies in Egypt are stronger and they control Judea. The Jews pay taxes and life goes on. Then in the year 200 BCE, the Seleucid family asserts its power over the Ptolemies and takes over control of Judea. Antiochus III, the Seleucid who controlled Judea, dies and leaves two sons, Seleucus IV and Antiochus IV. Seleucus dies mysteriously and Antiochus IV takes over. He wants to rule the entire known world and have everyone worship him. He puts idols of himself everywhere, but generally people ignore him and life goes on. In ancient Israel, the Hasidim, the pious ones, were farmers, and farmers don't have much free time most of the year. They were also traditionalists. They felt that free time should be used to study Torah, come closer to God, and make the world a place for all to live in peace and prosperity. So inside Judea, like everywhere in the Western world, there was a growing chasm between the more urban moneyed class, the traders and aristocrats, many of whom had adopted some of these beautiful Greek values, and the rural farmers who often saw these new values as a threat to their traditional beliefs and customs. In Judea, the educated priests and political leaders were part of the elite, the ruling class. They had greater access to and were more deeply influenced by Greek culture. a Hellenizer high priest named Jason was running the national religion. He was supporting all kinds of good Greek things like naked athletic events. The Hellenizers loved it. The Hasidim were not too happy, but life went on. People paid their taxes. Another ruling class Hellenistic Jewish leader named Menelaus bribes Antiochus into giving him the job of high priest. Again, Hellenizers were happy, Hasidim very unhappy. But when he received a large bribe of gold from the temple, Antiochus is very happy. There is a rumor that Antiochus all of a sudden has died. The Hasidim take the initiative and revolt. It was a false rumor, and Antiochus sends in troops who stop the rebellion in its tracks. Now, this rebellion really upsets Antiochus, and because the rebellion means the end of taxes and a lot of struggle and resources sent down to Judea to quell it. So he issues some pretty harsh decrees in Judea to try to break the spirit of the common folk, or at the very least get them in line. Some of his decrees included no more celebration of Shabbat, no more circumcision, no more kashrut, no more Passover, no more Jewish education, no more Jewish stuff. Pretty brutal. Antiochus has had enough of these stiff-necked Jewish people, and he sends his troops all over Judea. This little roadshow goes to every village and hamlet, and his soldiers, they bring idols of Antiochus, his laws, his way of life, with harsh consequences if his rules aren't followed. Now, among the stops on this tour was a peaceful town of Modi'in. In this town lives a priestly family known as Chashmon, Matisyahu and his sons. So, the soldiers come to town, they set up their idol, they order everyone to bow down to it on penalty of death. Suddenly, Matisyahu pulls out his sword and shouts, "All who are for the Lord, follow me." Within an instant, the Syrian Greek soldiers are slain, and the Chashmon family, the Chashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, have fled to the hills singing the prayer, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, who is like you, our God. The acronym for these words, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, is Mem Chaf Bet Aleph, Maccabi, which also means the hammer. So these rebels became known as Maccabees. These rebels refused to honor the existing rules of war, which were part of life in the ancient world. Open engagement on the field of battle, which of course they couldn't possibly win against the superior army. They instead fight a guerrilla war against the Syrians, the Greeks. They attack unexpectedly, they inflict damage, and they flee to the hills where the Syrian Greeks can't find them. Matisyahu dies, his son Judah takes over leading the good fight. It's a long war of attrition that drags on for years and bleeds the Syrian Greeks. And eventually, it is not worth their while to continue the fight, and they abandon Judea. Antiochus doesn't have he's tired of wasting the resources, and it's just not worth it to him. The Chashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, retake Jerusalem, and the temple is theirs. They clean it out, they take down the statues, they replace the altars, and they make it fit for Jewish worship. So When they had been fighting this guerrilla war, they hid out in the caves in the Judean hills. Sukkot, the festival of booths, was the most important holiday for farmers. It was the late harvest festival and the beginning of the rainy season, which was essential for good crops. Now, since they had missed celebrating Sukkot properly, when they rededicated the temple, even though it was winter already, they had a belated celebration of Sukkot, which is an 8-day celebration. They lit the menorah and celebrated the free and independent Jewish state. So you see, Chanukah was originally a Sukkot redux. The Maccabees, or Hashmonaim, made themselves and their offspring kings and priests after expelling the Syrian Greek Empire. In itself, this was a violation of the ancient Israelite constitution, which requires that the priests and the king come from different tribes, thereby creating a checks and balance system between religious and political power. Now, even worse, in the eyes of the 2nd century Talmudic rabbis, the Hasmonean kings, despite their anti-imperial, anti-assimilationist origins, had invited the Roman Empire to become protectors and overlords of the Jewish kingdom after a mere 100 years of independence. This invitation, of course, paved the way for the ultimate Roman conquest of Judea. The short-lived Hasmonean dynasty came to an end with Herod, who paranoiacally slaughtered off any remaining Hasmonean heirs he could find. The rabbis of the 2nd century of the Common Era were also living in a time when the iron fist of Rome had brutally crushed Jewish revolts, and they were not anxious to popularize any attempts at revolt. Jewish national liberation movements were off the table. Only the rabbinical kind of power survived. The power not of rock, but of water, fluid and soft from moment to moment, and yet irresistible over the long run. Only the rabbinical kind of power had protected and preserved Jewish peoplehood. So, where does this miracle aspect, the story about there only being oil for one day and it lasting 8 days until they could make more oil, where does this story come from? Hundreds of years later, it appears in the Talmud with the question we began with, Mahi Chanukah? What is Chanukah? The rabbis, in an inspired renewal of this essentially military victory, completely renew this holiday with light and spirit. Metaphorically, Chanukah is a time of rededication and renewal. The old altars, which had become impure, are torn down and new ones are built. It is a time of rededication of our spiritual selves. Our menorah has replaced that of the temple, and we have replaced the Levites and the priests. We are to be God's priests. But Chanukah teaches us that our service is not restricted to the temple. The struggle to light the menorah of religious freedom is an unending one. There are times when it is necessary to take up arms, but we always must know when it is time to put them down. Too many wars are lost in their victories. Too many revolutionaries forget why they originally began to fight. At times it is necessary to fight, but as Zechariah the prophet teaches, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the mystery at the heart of reality. It is the spirit that must be the ultimate victor. If not, the enemy will have won, for you will become like him. If it is not pacifism that is being advocated here, but rather the miracle of the menorah. to have fought and yet be able to cleanse the temple, rededicate it, to relight the menorah. This is the victory. Victory is to be free, not just a triumph. By lighting the menorah, we ignite the flames in our souls, the spark that cannot be extinguished. We place the menorahs in our windows to be visible to those passing by, just as our inner light must shine against the darkness of hate and indifference and must kindle the spirits of our fellow human beings. Chanukah, indeed, comes to teach us to embrace paradox. The earth that sustains us can easily become exploited, toxic. If we lose the nuance in any struggle, if we turn our backs on the sacred fire, we can become what we despise. In the darkest time of the year, the menorah reminds us that no matter how challenging life might be, there remains a source of light deep inside us. The light in our soul reflects and refracts the light from the one who is the source of all light, the source of all that is luminous. That is why the light of the menorah is holy and is not to be used for worldly things. Its light is not for reading, nor for doing business. With this light, we are not allowed to kindle mundane lights. We can kindle only other holy lights, the soul within each of us. Being kindled by the Chanukah lights, we are ready for Chanukah, the dedication of the temple, God's dwelling place. We are better prepared to embrace paradox and understand the true nature of earth and sacred fire. Rabbi Yossi said, "Once I was walking on a pitch black night when I saw a blind man walking with a torch in his hand. I asked him, 'Why do you carry the torch?' He replied, 'As long as the torch is in my hands, people can see me and help me.' Ken Yiratzon, so may it be. Stay safe, be well. Shalom uvracha, peace and blessings."